Hi guys, it is a spectacularly gorgeous day here in the end times, in paradise, in Driftwood, Texas, here on this gorgeous spring morning, Wednesday, April 26, 2017. It's gorgeous now, but it's heading up into the 90s today here in April, where it will stay for the next 6 months in Texas, so I need to be planning to get the hell out of here. Tragedy has struck today as we have lost the internet. Your old internet addicted eco-Nazi has lost his lifeline to the world. So I'm going to be packing up my tent and going, but I think I already have enough here in the kitty to bring you my weekly climate change meltdown roundup rant, where I simply go on the pages of the mainstream media to see how this planet has been descending into a burning lake of fire while I've been out partying like it's 1999 with my lovable clueless friends. And good Lord, the obvious story of the week is coming out of Antarctica. There must be 20 versions of this story about all of these new waterfalls and rivers and lakes of running water all over the continent of Antarctica. Down there is Antarctica. It just melts and goes into the oceans. And once again, we have the latest report that, oops, it is worse than we thought. Just gonna touch on a few of them. This is, if I can get this goddamn fucking computer unstuck. This is livescience.com. Hundreds of meltwater streams found flowing across Antarctica. Huge swaths of Antarctica are awash in draining meltwater during the summer months. The first ever continent-wide survey of meltwater shows. Although past studies revealed that portions of Antarctica's western peninsula were melting at an alarming rate, most scientists believed the rest of the continent did not face extensive melting during Antarctica's summer months. This is the study author Jonathan Kingslake, glaciologist from Columbia University. Quote, "This is not in the future. This is widespread now and has been for decades. I think most polar scientists have considered water moving across the surface of Antarctica to be extremely rare, but we found a lot of it over very large areas." Here's good all those eco-Nazis at Good Morning America. Antarctica is melting faster than originally thought. New study finds. Let's see, the good old Weather Channel coming in on it. Antarctica is covered with flowing water, and that worries scientists. And they always say about how it worries scientists, but I guess nobody else is worried that the continent of Antarctica is just melting into the ocean. Let's see, I don't even know who the hell this is. Don't even know which mainstream media outlet this is. It got cut off. Reuters. Okay. And their spin on it is Antarctica has a network of meltwater rivers that is much larger than previously thought, which could doom flimsy ice shelves at the edge of the continent. And this is the only article that I found where they connected any dots between this and between this study and climate change. See, what it's talking about, all of these articles mention that explorers going all the way back to 1912 have reported finding liquid water pooling on top of the ice. And we have aerial photographs of this going back to 1947. And here it is, 2017. So of course what the climate change deniers are going to do is point to this. Well, hell, they were talking about this over 100 years ago. That no shit Sherlock, that nothing has changed. But nobody knows. You know, I just find this hard to fucking believe. I don't know, guys. You know, it's just hard to believe that this study is just coming out here in 2017. So now the big debate is, it's like they have to draw the baseline here in 2017 so they can compare, you know what I'm saying, now that they have the baseline and the continent-wide aerial photos from the summer that just ended, they can come back each year and measure the increase. What the fuck have they been doing since 1947? Jesus. Let's see, the studies, this was actually 2 studies which were just published in the journal Nature, were based on the systematic cataloging of surface water images in the Antarctic dating as far back as 1947, coupled with satellite imagery from 1973. In total, the researchers this year found close to 700 systems of interconnected waterways at the edge of the continent. Some of the rivers are 75 miles long. Here's a 400-foot wide waterfall pouring into the ocean. And at the very bottom of the article, the very bottom of this article, which was nowhere even mentioned in all the other articles I read, you have to get to this article and get to the bottom of it to find the total dot connecting between this and climate change. Of course, the extent of the meltwater network may have grown over the past few decades in concert with rising temperatures because of climate change. Unfortunately, there is no way to know for sure, since early data is sparse in many areas. Still, this is, I don't know, one of these climatologists, Dr. Trussell, whoever Dr. Trussell is, weighing in on this. The climatologist says he is all but certain that melting in the Antarctic will become more widespread in the coming years. Quote, My research has assessed how surface melting may change in the future under various climate scenarios. It shows that human emissions of greenhouse gases essentially control the future of surface melting in Antarctica. The more we emit, the more surface melting and the greater potential for future ice shelf collapses and accelerated contributions to sea level rise. No shit, Sherlock. So anyway, here you go. So what have we got up north this summer? Going into this summer up north, we have 7,000 methane bombs getting ready to blow. On the opposite end of the world, we have 400-foot waterfalls pouring 75-mile-long rivers of meltwater into the Antarctic Ocean, while these climate change deniers continue to debate this issue of whether or not we are fucked. Anyway, let's just look at the entire planet. Probably the second biggest story this week, and the main... Oops, we'll get to this in a minute. Okay, one small story from, again, I don't know, Grist. Good old Grist magazine. I need to feature them more often. We just hit 410 parts per million of CO2. Welcome to a whole new world.
No shit, Sherlock.
This is not normal. We are on track to witness a climate unseen in 50 million years by mid-century. Yep. In pre-industrial times, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere stood at 280 parts per million, and that number has been rising ever since, warming the planet by about 1 degree Celsius along the way. CO2 levels fluctuate with the seasons, climbing a bit higher each spring. We first hit 400 parts per million in 2013, and that became the new normal just 4 years later. And on April 18th this year, as predicted, we crossed the 410 parts per million threshold for the first time ever at that observatory over there in Hawaii. So there you go, guys. 410 and climbing. You can connect those dots to these this next story. There's two versions of it. The second biggest story, I guess, on the planet after all of this meltwater in Antarctica. Study: man-made extreme weather has hit all over the world. Most people on Earth have already felt extreme and record heat, drought, or downpours goosed by man-made global warming, new research finds. In a first-of-its-kind study, scientists analyzed weather stations worldwide and calculated that in 85% of the cases, the record for hottest day of the year had the fingerprints of climate change. Heat-trapping gases from the burning of coal, oil, and natural gas made those records more likely or more intense. This is lead author and Stanford University climate scientist Noah Diffenbaugh. Quote, "The world is not quite at the point where every hot temperature record has a human fingerprint, but it is getting close to that. Yes, and this gets pretty complicated pretty quick about how they decide. You know, this is the big thing. I just get so sick of it. Every single weather event, extreme weather event on this planet that I have ever reported about, going back to Hurricane Sandy and earlier, ever since I started these climate change roundup rants, every single one of them, virtually bar none, it's, would this have happened if humans had never been invented? If humans had never set foot on this planet, would the same thing be happening? And so you better believe the climate change deniers will have a field day with this newest study, how they can tell. My guess is this study is way too conservative, like every other one of their goddamn studies. Way too conservative. Let's see. Let's look at, well, Andrew Friedman from Mashable. What is his spin? What is Andy's spin on this? Global warming is sharply raising the risk of unprecedented events. Yeah, so once, I guess once an event sets a precedent, it is no longer unprecedented. We pretty soon we're just going to have to get the word unprecedented, as every year more and more we have less and less unprecedented, or more and more. Anyway, around the world, global warming is making unprecedented weather and climate events far more likely to occur, with the planet now teetering on the edge of a new era of routinely damaging global warming related extremes, a new study found. Yes, the study published Monday in Proceedings of the National Academy of Science found that in addition to making extreme events more likely across broad swaths of the globe, climate change is also making such events more severe. Yes, the study is rooted in an emerging field of climate detective work in which climate scientists seek to detect the role that human-caused climate change may have played in often damaging extreme events. And then he breaks all this down, how they came up with this study. So let's just go around the country and the planet, just looking at a few examples of how this may or may not be playing out. You decide. You decide about the human fingerprint. I just picked a few here in the roundup. Let's go down there to Florida, where I think it might have finally started raining yesterday. This is from a couple of days ago. Wildfires rage across Florida, destroying homes and displacing thousands. This was 3 separate wildfires raged across parts of Florida on Saturday, burning up homes and forcing the evacuation of thousands of residents. One blaze has burned 5,500 acres and destroyed 9 homes in Collier County near Naples. As of Saturday night, mandatory evacuations were in effect for more than 6,000 homes. in Collier County, and going up there in Polk County, the entire Indian Lake Estates subdivision, which encompasses 800 homes, were put under a mandatory evacuation due to a large wildfire that authorities suspect may have been intentionally set. Someone not happy with the Indian Lakes subdivision, probably draining some beautiful swamp. Okay, we're going to go from Alaska to Florida for you to decide the human fingerprint on this story. Alaskan village fights for survival as island disappears. Climate change is not an abstract debate. For the villagers of Kivalina, an island off Alaska's northwest coast, it is a matter of survival. The indigenous whaling community's remote home island is vanishing into the surrounding Chukchi Sea little by little each year as Arctic sea ice melts due to global warming. Yes. Sea ice that typically served as a protective barrier from violent storms has been failing to form every year since 2004. The roughly 450 residents have seen torrents wash away more and more of their island. Do you think so? Good Lord, this goes on and on. I wanted to read some quotes from the villagers, but I don't have time to track them down. So we're going to go, let's just stay up there as we head into the Arctic summer. How the reindeer are looking forward to the shit coming down. Reindeer at risk from Arctic hot spill.
No shit, Sherlock.
Yes, reindeer. Good luck, guys. Winter temperatures in Norway's Lapland could this is actually talking about winter temperatures in Norway's Lapland could rise dramatically this century, with potentially devastating consequences for the region's reindeer and the indigenous Sami people who make their living herding them. A vast frozen tundra in Norway's far north is experiencing a hot spill, wreaking havoc on the centuries-old Sami way of life. This is Per Gaup, a colorful reindeer herder. Quote, "We already feel the effects of global warming here. I can see that we are losing more reindeer because of climate change." And what they're talking about here in this story is actually not even talking about the summertime heat wave getting ready to hit and bring out, what was it last year, anthrax? That as the permafrost started to fall, anthrax virus that's been frozen for thousands of years being released into the reindeer herds. You can expect to see that again this summer. I guarantee you I will be reading about more reindeer dying of anthrax and no telling what all else. This is just talking about the winter time temperatures getting warmer. Not even talking about the goddamn summer. Reindeer and caribou. Anyway, let's see. Where can we go from the northern... Norway. We're going to switch gears here pretty radically and go from reindeer to Michael Bloomberg. I just did my quote of the day coming from Michael Bloomberg, but if you missed that, this is what it was based on. Hallelujah. Michael Bloomberg, the special envoy, the special climate envoy to the United Nations, former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, has now become my new Humpty Dumpty tribe hero after Michael Bloomberg called bullshit on this energy technology known as carbon capture and storage. Michael Bloomberg, an outspoken environmentalist and former New York City mayor, had some harsh words for carbon capture and storage, the unproven technology that proponents, these techno-utopians, say will turn fossil fuels into clean energy sources. Quote, carbon capture, quoting Michael Bloomberg, quote, carbon capture is total bullshit and a figment of the imagination, close quote. Says the special envoy to the United Nations, who of course has carbon capture and storage built in to its equation of how we're going to meet this absolutely laughable goal, this 2°C target, that they are building CCS and geoengineering into the equation of how we're going to do this when we have no fucking idea how we're going to do this. They're making a big fucking assumption on something we have no idea how to do. Michael Bloomberg, anybody else with a brain, is calling them on it. This is the fossil fuel corporations supporting this unadulterated horseshit, just like they are supporting the Paris Climate Agreement. This unadulterated horseshit, CCS, non-existent technology, is one more way the fossil fuel industry is just getting a license by the United Nations to go on about its business. Is there anybody failing to understand this? If you don't want to believe this old eco-Nazi, go listen to goddamn Michael Bloomberg. So what is this shit, for those of you not aware of this? Carbon capture involves taking the emissions from coal and natural gas burning power plants and other industrial facilities, then burying the carbon deep underground or repurposing it for fertilizers and chemicals. The unadulterated horseshit idea is that by trapping emissions before they enter the atmosphere, we can limit their contribution to human-caused climate change.
Come on now, that ain't even bullshit. That's horseshit.
Climate experts, including Paul Beckwith, say it will be next to impossible to eliminate the world's emissions without carbon capture systems. The International Energy Agency has called the technology essential, given that countries are likely to keep burning coal, oil, and natural gas for decades to come. Are you starting to figure this out? The reason we need this pie-in-the-sky technology is because there's no fucking way that we're giving up fossil fuels. This is just continuing the broken model for decades to come. Instead of getting rid of fossil fuels, it's finding a way to a bullshit, unattainable way to let the fossil fuel paradigm continue. But anyway, I got to move on, because what do I have? 4 more stories. As long as we're talking about unadulterated horseshit, what is coming out of Al Gore's mouth this week? Excellent chance that U.S. will stay in Paris Agreement.
Oh shit. Sure.
This is exactly what I've been predicting, that the U.S. sure as shit will stay in the Paris Agreement after the fossil fuel companies who wrote the Paris Agreement, or at the very least signed off on it, get it through Donald Trump's thick skull that the Paris Climate Agreement gives the fossil fuel industry license to keep doing what it's doing. It is a gift to the fossil fuel industry, written by the fossil fuel industry. And as soon as Donald Trump realizes this, and my guess is he already does, he will stay in the Paris Climate Agreement. It will be interesting to see how Donald Trump explains his flip-flop on his campaign promise to get out of the Paris Climate Agreement. It'll be interesting to see how he spins this, but when he does announce that we're staying in it, then you will know the real reason why. Anyway, just real quick, let's look at a quote from Mr. Al Gore. Quote, "I think that there is an excellent chance, far better than 50-50, that the United States will decide to stay in the Paris Agreement." Close quote. I love this. Gore said during a roundtable discussion at this week's meeting of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. This is our old Save the Planet environmentalist Al Gore, the keynote speaker at this week's meeting of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Guys, the sick, twisted, black comedy of this entire dog and pony show unfolding on this planet. Anybody who does not appreciate the sick, twisted humor of Al Gore speaking at the World Bank and the IMF meeting, I don't know what your definition of comedy is. Though they are major contributors to U.S. carbon emissions, U.S. energy companies have urged the Trump administration not to exit the Paris Agreement.
No shit, Sherlock.
Which is exactly why the Trump administration will not exit the Paris Agreement. Alright, we're going to close over there in China. You know, this one, again, guys, anyone failing, you know, there's no way the Onion, as I say, you cannot tell the difference between the Onion and, in this case, Bloomberg anymore. Bloomberg, the magazine, not Bloomberg, the former mayor. According to Bloomberg, China doubts U.S. climate pledge as Trump mulls Paris withdrawal. China, the world's top emitter of carbon dioxide, is questioning whether the U.S., whether China is questioning whether the U.S. is doing enough under President Donald Trump to meet its commitments made as part of the landmark Paris Climate Accord. China joined Brazil. China joined Brazil, the UK, and other countries in scrutinizing U.S. climate progress in queries filed with the United Nations. And I'm not entirely sure what this next sentence means. The response from China and Brazil and all of these other goddamn planet eaters who have absolutely zero chance of meeting their commitments to this unadulterated horseshit, the responses illustrate the potential global humiliation, if not outright retaliation, the U.S. could incur if Trump decides to keep the country in the pact as he eviscerates policies central to keeping its carbon cutting commitment. So, you know, Donald Trump is in a lose-lose position with the rest of the goddamn hypocrites on this planet from China and Brazil and everywhere. So if he pulls out of the agreement, he's going to get all of this shit from the rest of the country. And if he stays in the agreement while eviscerating the tiny little steps that Barack Obama took to actually making some dent in our carbon emissions, he's going to become even a bigger laughingstock. Donald Trump is a fucking laughingstock no matter which way he goes, and the way he is going to go, obviously, is this. He is going to stay in the pact, and while he continues to eviscerate any tiny little steps that Barack Obama made over there in Paris. That's exactly what's going to happen. Let's see. 2 more stories about China. Converting coal would help China's smog at the climate's expense. So what this gets to be a pretty complicated story about how China is talking about, instead of directly burning the coal, that they're going to create natural gas from the coal and burn that natural gas in their power plants. This is the ultimate definition of clean coal. It never really explains what happens to all of the unburned portion of the coal. Anyway, that's not even talked about. Sure as hell doesn't get into the whole subject of global dimming, which I do not have time to get into. But there's only one problem with this idea about turning coal into natural gas. Let's see. Anyway, okay, here we go. Finally, when you get about 2/3 of the way through this very complicated story, compared to this is the one problem with this great plan. Compared to burning coal directly for power, converting it into gas and then using that gas to produce electricity can in fact produce almost twice as much carbon dioxide and other greenhouse emissions blamed in climate change than burning the coal directly. Synthetic natural gas produces carbon dioxide first during the process stage and again when the fuel is burned. The coal to gas plants in China, according to Chinese officials, could emit as much as 158 million tons of carbon dioxide annually, but Greenpeace, the way according to their number crunching, they would say if China goes through with this bullshit plan, they would actually be creating up to 451 million tons of extra carbon dioxide annually by 2020. So there you go. So it sounds like China is going to keep on burning coal. No shit, Sherlock, which may or may not have something to do with this final headline from the mainstream media. This may be one reason people in China are becoming less happy. There is one reason people in China are becoming less happy. Anyway, I gotta wrap up this happy climate change meltdown roundup rant. I see him at 43 minutes. And head across the street to see if I can find some internet at the Salt Lick Barbecue restaurant, because if I can't, I'm gonna have to come back and pack up my tent and head out of here back to Austin, Texas, so I can put this rant on the internet. Bye, guys.